Hi there, and welcome to the Daily Gardener, and thank you for listening. I'm your host, Jennifer Ebling. It's October 24th. Today we celebrate the scientist who set the stage for plant anatomy and the amazing botanical illustrator Marianne North, who traveled the world capturing exotic flowers with her magnificent oil paintings. We also celebrate Margaret Owen, the English galanthophile and gardener we lost 5 years ago today. We'll hear some thoughts from Emily Dickinson about autumn. It's her Nature 27 poem with the famous line, "I'll put a trinket on." And we'll grow that garden library with today's book, The Daylily, by John Peet and Ted Pettit. I'll talk about the perennials you can cut back right now, and then wrap things up with a sweet story about a rose poem that went viral in 1885. But first, let's catch up on a few recent events. Early this month, the magazine Hoodline published an article about Inkdwell's latest installation as part of their Migrating Mural project. Inkdwell selected a location at 455 Hyde Street in San Francisco as the site of their next Monarch mural. The 44-unit, 11-story apartment building was due for a new paint job anyway, so it was the perfect canvas for the project. Imagine an 11-story mural dedicated to the Monarch. Inkdwell has installed similar murals at 8 other locations across the country to raise awareness about the declining monarch butterfly population. The project on Hyde Street will be the largest installation, covering 3 sides of the building, and Inkdwell hopes the mural makes monarch butterflies impossible to ignore. Inkdwell and its conservation partner, the Xerxes Society, work with communities to provide information and educational materials about the butterfly. And Gardenista recently shared an excellent article by Barbara Peck called 10 Things Your Landscape Architect Wishes You Knew, but is too polite to tell you. I'll share 3 of my favorites from this list right now. First, your children will quickly outgrow your space. This is so true. For me, I put a big swing set in the backyard, and then about 3 to 5 years later, we installed a little stream on the side of our property. And had I known how much fun the kids would have with the stream, we could have skipped the swing set altogether. In this piece by Gardenista, written by Barbara Peck, the landscape architect Kate Stickley says, "Your children will outgrow, outthrow, and outkick your small lawn long before you finish creating your garden, so don't plan your space around them." She suggests that while your kids are young, let them blow off steam in the neighborhood park. Meanwhile, plan an outdoor space for your future teens and their friends, one that feels private, but is still within the property lines. Great idea. The second tip is that gravel can't replace mulch. Some folks prefer gravel because it stays in place. And I have gravel paths. But gravel offers nothing nutrient-wise for the soil. Landscape architects Gretchen Whittier and Kate Stickley suggest planting ground cover near walkways and giving it time to spread out. You may still need mulch, but perhaps only for one season. And the third tip they have is that a specimen tree won't live forever. They said, designing and building your new house around a beautiful specimen tree isn't always the best course of action. Before even starting the design process, consult an arborist to find out the tree's health and longevity. Now, if you'd like to check out these curated articles for yourself, you're in luck because I share all of it with the listener community in the free Facebook group, the Daily Gardener Community. So there's no need to take notes or track down links. Just head on over to the group and join. The next time you're in Facebook, just search for Daily Gardener Community. Here's today's brevities. Today in 1632, the father of microbiology, Antonie van Leeuwenhoek, was born. Leeuwenhoek's interest in making lenses led to his discovery of microbial life. Leeuwenhoek's work set the stage for plant anatomy. And today is the birthday of the intrepid traveler and botanical artist, Marianne North, who was born on this day in 1830. Marianne's father was friends with Darwin and Sir Joseph Dalton Hooker, who was the director of the Royal Botanic Gardens, Kew. When she was 25 years old, Marianne's mother died, and she turned to flower painting as a way to cope with her grief. 15 years later, right before she turned 40, Marianne's father died. By this point, Marianne was an experienced traveler and painter. She had means and autonomy. And she decided to spend the rest of her life traveling the globe to find and paint the exotic flowers of the world. Among her many excursions, Marianne spent a year living in a hut and painting the flowers of the Brazilian forest. She painted the giant redwood trees of California and was heartbroken at their destruction. It was Marianne North who said, "It broke one's heart to think of man, the civilizer, wasting treasures in a few years to which savages and animals had done no harm for centuries." In September 1880, based on the recommendation of her father's great friend, Charles Darwin, Marianne visited Australia. As for Marianne, she referred to Darwin as the greatest man living. Darwin specifically suggested Australia for Marianne because the flora and fauna down under were less known and more unique. Marianne traveled by coach between Brisbane and Sydney, painting at every stop when she lamented, "They never stop where the flowers are." To make matters worse, the brevity of the overnight stops meant her oil paintings didn't have time to dry completely. During her visit there, Marianne painted a tree that would become known as the Marianne North tree. It was a twisted carry tree located near Pemberton. Marianne single-handedly created over 1,000 pieces of floral art. She became a renowned botanical illustrator with several plant species named in her honor. Her body of work has been on permanent display at Kew Gardens since 1882. If you can imagine a gallery of rooms with walls plastered with pieces of art about the size of an 8.5 by 11 sheet of paper, you can envision the impact of standing in the Marianne North Gallery. The 832 paintings represent 20 years of travel over 5 continents and 17 countries, capturing the scenery and the flora in vibrant oil color. The North Gallery was paid for by an endowment from Marianne North. And in 2016, the BBC aired a documentary about Marianne North called Kew's Forgotten Queen. Today is the 5th anniversary of the death of Margaret Owen, who died on this day in 2014. Owen was an English farmer and gardener. When she was 20, Margaret married Godfrey Owen. He had proposed to her in a cattle shed. On their family farm, they raised 4 children together. They were together for 33 years. But when Margaret was 53, Godfrey died from a brain tumor. Margaret decided to move out of the farmhouse, and she gave the farm to their son. But she had the idea of keeping an acre of land for herself to create a garden she called the Patch. With her focus on gardening, Margaret found herself drawn to snowdrops, and she became a galanthophile, or an expert on snowdrops. Margaret herself discovered many stunning snowdrops. She named one of the most striking after her husband, calling it the Godfrey Owen. The Godfrey Owen snowdrop is a stunner. It's a double-flowered snowdrop with 6 outer petals and 6 inner segments. Most snowdrops have just 3 exterior and 3 interior petals. Margaret also named other plants in honor of her husband. She named an iris, a bergenia, and a Guernsey lily species, Godfrey Owen, as well. As a plantswoman extraordinaire, Margaret is remembered by many for her snowdrop parties, which took place on the last Saturday in February. Margaret happily hosted a who's who of English horticulture. The day after the party, Margaret would dig up her snowdrops in the patch and then sell them to her guests and visitors. Then she donated all of the proceeds to the Multiple Sclerosis Society in honor of her sister. In Unearthed Words, here's a poem about autumn from Emily Dickinson. The morns are meeker than they were. The nuts are getting brown. The berry's cheek is plumper. The rose is out of town. The maple wears a gayer scarf, the field a scarlet gown. Lest I should be old-fashioned, I'll put a trinket on. All right, it's time to grow that garden library with today's book, The Daylily, by John P. Peet and Ted L. Pettit. Daylilies are tough, carefree beauties. They can survive the tropical heat of a Florida garden and the bitter cold of a northern garden. And daylilies are some of the easiest plants to hybridize. For close to 100 years, gardeners have been hybridizing their most desirable features in an attempt to create new, more evolved daylilies. Peet and Pettit were inspired by Bill Munson Jr.'s classic book on Hemerocallis, or the daylily. They review the history of the daylily and share many of the hybrids, along with excellent advice for growing, featuring chapters from some of the top daylily authorities from around the world. And I love what they mention in the preface of their book about gardeners who join daylily clubs and societies. They said that the gardeners come for the flower, but stay for the people. This book came out in 2004. You can get used copies using the Amazon link in today's show notes for under $10. Here's today's garden chore. Plants that can be cut back in the fall right now include hostas, yarrow, peonies, coreopsis, bee balm, daylilies, and you can cut your iris back to about 4 inches above the ground. Finally, here's something sweet to revive the little botanic spark in your heart. It was on this day in 1885 that a little poem about a rose by the English poet Henry Austin Dobson appeared in the Leicester Chronicle in England. It was an instant hit and picked up by newspapers around the world. I spent a little time piecing together various remnants about the poem online, and I cobbled together a little backstory along with my own analysis about this charming piece to help you understand it. Dobson's poem is titled A Fancy from Fontenelle, and it has a long French subtitle, which means, as far as any rose could remember, no gardener had ever died. The French philosopher and writer Diderot inspired Dobson. In 1769, Diderot wrote a story about something called the fallacy of the ephemeral. One of the main characters in the story is named Fontenelle. The fallacy of the ephemeral alludes to the false belief held by Fontenelle's garden roses that their gardener is immortal. The roses emerge in the spring, they thrive in the summer, and then go dormant as fall changes to winter. Through every season, the gardener is always there tending to them. So, in other words, no rose has ever lived long enough to remember the death of the gardener. Along those lines, Dobson's poem is also told from the perspective of the rose. In this case, the rose is vain and self-assured. She incorrectly assumes that she will outlive the old gardener that tends her. Dobson's message reinforces the fallacy of the ephemeral. The simple truth is revealed at the end of the poem, and I believe it's what led to the poem's popularity. Beauty fades, and time marches on. Here's A Fancy from Fontenelle by Henry Austin Dobson. The rose in the garden slipped her bud, and she laughed in the pride of her youthful blood as she thought of the gardener standing by. He is old, so old, and he soon must die. The full rose waxed in the warm June air, and she spread and spread till her heart lay bare, and she laughed once more as she heard his tread. He's older now, he will soon be dead. But the breeze of the morning blew and found the leaves of the blown rose strewed the ground. And he came at noon, that gardener old, and he raked them gently under the mold. And I wove the thing to a random rhyme, for the rose is beauty, the gardener time. Thanks for listening to The Daily Gardener, and remember, for a happy, healthy life, garden every day. The Daily Gardener is produced weekdays in lovely Maple Grove, Minnesota. You can find complete show notes over at thedailygardener.org, and be sure to share the show with your garden friends. You can find The Daily Gardener on all your favorite social media, Instagram, Twitter, and Pinterest, and of course, Facebook. While you're over at Facebook, don't forget to join the Daily Gardener community. Just search for these 3 words, Daily Gardener Community. The group will pop right up and then request to join. Finally, I want to thank my team at Podfly Productions, where my fabulous editor is Eric Begay. Have a great day in the garden, and we'll see you tomorrow.